All right. Good morning, everybody. So I am gonna run down really quick how to run the wheel. I know this is something that you guys have all been pretty interested in, and it's kind of a complex strategy. And I'll post a couple documents that go along with it. But the general premise is right here, right? So you want to. This is kind of like step one, step 1.5, step 1.75, and then this is kind of the other way to go about it, right? So we'll call it 1, 2, and 3, right? So the first idea is you have to choose a stock you want to own. That can be anything from Webull to Robinhood to Coinbase, any stock that you are relatively passionate about, something that you wouldn't mind holding long term. Right. So, for this example, I'm going to use Nvidia because Nvidia has really good options, premiums, and I think it's going to be a pretty good place to start. So we will go look at Nvidia, and actually, I think one thing we should do here first is we probably need to get a little bit of an understanding of what options are, right? That's probably a better place to start than jumping straight over to Nvidia. So an options contract, it's something that if you've followed me for any length of time, we buy option contracts, right? And so when you actually click buy on that contract, you're basically digitally signing a agreement or a contract that says I will buy 100 shares of this stock at that strike price. So we can use Nvidia for this. Current share price of Nvidia right now is 168.50, give or take. If I wanted to buy calls because I thought it was going to go up, I would buy them for the 170. So by buying that position, I am signing a contract that says I will purchase 100 shares of Nvidia at $170. Okay, that's why we call them contracts, because you are digitally signing them, and it is a kind of like a written agreement. And so that's what an options contract is. Now, on the flip side, when you sell a position, you are basically saying, I will sell my stock at that price if we are at that price or below. So again, we'll use Nvidia kind of as an example, right? Let's see. Let me grab it here and pull it over where I can see it better. So, like I said, currently Nvidia is about we'll call it 168.50. Okay. So we'll put that up on our screen here. Nvidia. Oh, that's great. I look like a kindergartner. Can I just text? Yeah, we'll do this. Nvidia at 168.50. That is the price of the stock currently. Okay. So if Nvidia is at 168.50 and we wanted to sell a position of, let's say, let's see, we want to sell a position, we'll call them 165s. So put it here. We want to sell Nvidia CSP at 165. Okay, 165 is the strike price. So that means that as long as so hang on, before I get ahead of myself. So we want to sell Nvidia CSPs at 165, right? If we were to do that today, we would net, and let's say we sold, let me put a number. We want to sell, we'll do 10, okay? We want to sell 10x Nvidia CSPs at 165 strike. That would net us, currently those are selling for 93 So the 165 puts are selling for currently $93, or 0.93 on the options chain, but you guys know, you understand how that works. So that would make us a net profit right now in our pocket. We would collect $93 times 10, right? So you're going to net, put it right here, net profit of $930. Now you're thinking, okay, well that's great, I just made $930. There's a little bit of a risk, and there's not a real risk, but there is a little bit of a risk, right? So if Nvidia falls down, so actually I can probably just do this, right? So we'll grab TradingView, we'll go over to Nvidia. So currently Nvidia is on a big upswing, right? Currently looking good, market's kind of pushing up. These options would expire in 2.5 days. 165 seems like it's a long ways down here, right? So you're thinking that seems pretty safe. Let me put a line here at 165. Okay. So the idea is that as long as Nvidia stays above this green line, you get to keep that $930. Okay? That's great. If Nvidia falls below this green line, it does something like this, you still get to keep your $930. But what you also get to keep, or what not keep, the other thing you have to do is you do have to purchase 1,000 shares, which is 10 contracts. You remember one contract is 100. One contract is 100 shares. So you would take 10 times the 100 shares, and you would have to purchase you would have to purchase 1,000 shares at 165. Now you sit here and think, you're like, okay, that's fine. You know, that's $16,500 that I have to put into Nvidia, right? So let's say it does fall below that line. You now you are legally obligated to purchase 1,000 shares at 165. Okay, probably not a big deal, right? That seems like a pretty good entry on Nvidia. And so come Friday afternoon, you are now the proud owner of 1,000 shares of Nvidia, and you also get to keep that $930 you made, right? So at this point, there's no risk. There's no risk in this up until this point. So we have checked off, choose the stock you want to own. You want to sell a put position with a strike price below the current market value, which is at 165. You want to set aside enough cash to buy 100 shares at that strike price, which in this case we bought 10 of them, so it's 1,000 shares. And then if we stay above, same thing, you keep the premium and it will expire worthless. Okay, so you get to keep the 930. Now, this is where we were at. If assigned, sell covered calls. Okay, so at this point, we kept our 930, but now we also have 1,000 shares, right? There's nothing we can do about it. We own it. It is what it is. Okay, so if that's the case, once you own the shares, now instead of selling cash secured puts, you're going to sell covered calls. And a covered call is the same thing in reverse. You now own 1,000 shares of Nvidia. Okay. So same thing. You own 1,000 shares of Nvidia, and you can sell them. Let me find my Robinhood. You can now sell covered calls back to the market. So let's say in this case, you want to sell a covered call, and let's say, so we have 10 of them, and we want to sell 172.50s. Okay. So now that we own them, let's go back to whiteboard. We'll put it right over here. We now own 1,000 shares of Nvidia at $165. Okay. we want to make our money. We want to continue to make money, and we want our shares to work for us. We don't want our shares to just sit there and accrue value on their own. We want to make a little extra on top of it, right? So, of course, if you want to just sit and hold it, great. You can use this to, you can do it like, let's say 165 was what you were going to enter at anyway, right? So instead of just waiting and then getting in at 165, you now made $960 on the way down, and then you still got in at 165, right? So let your money work for you. So anyway, we now own 1,000 shares of NVIDIA at 165, and we want to make our money work for us. So we are going to sell covered calls. And we've already established covered calls are the same things in reverse. So you would go to sell above current market value. So if we got in at 165 and you want to sell like the next leg up. So let's say 170s, right? That's a $5 move. If you sell them every week, NVIDIA might not move $5. This is just an example, but we're going to sell 10x 170 calls on NVIDIA at, those are currently 156. Okay, so if we're selling 10 of those above our strike price, because you don't want to sell below your strike price, because that just don't do it. It's a long story. You want to sell above your strike price that you got in at, right? Because you don't want to have to sell those in the event that it does hit, right? So like in this case, we're selling 10 170 calls at 156, right? So you're making that would net profit of $1,560. Okay, so as soon as you sell this position, the second you sell this position, this is going into your account because someone paid you for those contracts, right? Now, you only have to give them those contracts if NVIDIA goes above 170. So let's draw our line here. Above 170. So as long as NVIDIA just does something like this and it stays underneath that line, as long as we stay underneath that line, you get to keep that $1,500 and you get to keep your shares. Okay? So you keep your shares and you keep your money that you made on premiums, and then you do it again the next week. Okay? You just do it over and over and over and over and over, and you don't have to sell 170s every week. Maybe over the weekend, right? Let's say NVIDIA goes to like 180, right? But it was over the weekend, and you were selling a weekly contract that expired on Friday, right? So like maybe Monday morning, or maybe an Asia market or something, like NVIDIA goes through the roof. Well, now you can sell 180s, right? And then there's no risk because your entry was 165, right? So the higher and higher and higher and higher you sell, just the more that you can make over and over and over again, and there's no real risk. Now, a few things can go wrong, right? But they're relatively small, I think. One thing that can happen is, let's say you were trying to buy those 165 puts, or you sold those 165 puts, so now you are legally obligated to buy them at 165, okay? Let's say bad news comes out, okay? Bad news comes out over the weekend. Oh, let's not do that. Bad news comes out over the weekend, and NVIDIA does one of these, right? So it goes up, and then bad news comes out on Friday, and we go like down here, okay? So now let's say we'll call it 155. Well, come Friday, you still have to buy that position at 165. So you will instantaneously be down $1,000 because you are $10 under on 1,000 contracts, right? So, or I'm sorry, 10 contracts, 1,000 shares at 165. You're now down $10 per share. So that is where the biggest risk comes, is if while you are in that position, if it goes like way the wrong way, Now, you don't have to hold those positions. Like if you see that happening, or like maybe you're way down here, you're at like 160, you can roll the position to the next week. Does cost a little bit of money, but you don't get stuck in a position you don't want to be in, or you can just buy your options back. You can just buy your position back. Again, it's going to cost you money. You're going to lose a little bit, but for the most part, you don't have to get stuck in this position that's way, way, way down here. Now, let's say that you do. It's okay. It's okay. Life will go on. You will still be in that position. If it is a stock that you are okay owning, it's just like you bought at 165 and now you're down, right? So it's not the end of the world. You'll just continue to sell cash secured you'll continue to sell covered calls to recoup some of that money back. So in this case, like let's say it was at 155, maybe then the next week you would sell 160s, and then 165s, and then you would just, as the market goes up and moves around. So that is the basis of it in like a 10,000 foot view. It gives you kind of like the idea of like risk management and how you kind of go about that. But that's why it's called the wheel, because you just keep it rolling, right? You just over and over and over and over. And then like, let's say in the off chance you sold these 170s and they hit, okay, well then you collect the $1,500 and the money for selling them at 170. And then you can do it again. You have all that money is back in your pocket. You didn't lose anything. And then you can either do it on NVIDIA again, or you can find something like AMD or Meta or Microsoft or whatever it may be, right? The idea here is to make anywhere from 1.5% to 3% of your overall position. So like on this one on NVIDIA, right, we were going to end up paying $16.5, and we were going to make $15.60 every week, as long as it doesn't get called away. So a little under 1% on that particular example, but it just is what it is. That's just NVIDIA for you. The contracts are $2.50 apart, so that's kind of why. But you can do it on all kinds of things. Again, that just kind of gives you a brief overview. And looking back at here, we'll go back through and check everything off, right? So we chose NVIDIA as our stock we wanted to own. We sold a 165 strike put. We put away enough money to cover that position. That position expired worthless, so we get to keep the premium. And then we'll say we did it the next week, and this time we got assigned, right? So now we own the shares, and we're going to start selling covered calls back to the market. We pick a strike price that is above current market value. If the stock does not go above that price, then we get to keep our shares and the premium. And so we'll do it again the next week, and then let's say it does go above that strike price and they get called away. You still make your money. You made your money on the premium, and you made money on the stock going up. You do it again the next week, and that's when you would go back to selling cash secured puts, because we no longer have those shares. We sold them off. So now we go back to selling cash secured puts, and then we just do that over and 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 over, and it will just continue to grow. These are some typical parameters that you probably want to look out for. The delta on your position is about 1.5 to 2.5. I mean, you guys can read here. If you like big swings, these will make you a lot of money. If you like kind of like swing trading, kind of like what Brit does, if you can find one that you think it's going to stay below a certain price, but it's like, maybe we'll go back to NVIDIA really quick, right? Go to NVIDIA. We'll go to the daily chart. Let's just say you are, okay, that's random. Let's say you're looking at NVIDIA right here and you're like, man, I'm really bearish on this stock. I don't even think we're going to get above 170. You would tell yourself like, Okay, we're kind of tracking. We might come up to 170, but then I see us going like all the way down to like 150, right? Just something crazy. So if you wanted to sell one that was 45 days out on NVIDIA, October 24th, if you wanted to sell a cash secured put right now, or I'm sorry, let's say you already own them. So we're going to sell covered calls. If you don't think we will be above 170 in 45 days, you could sell those positions for $770 a piece. And now remember, we only paid $16.50 for that, right? So like napkin math says $770 times 10, right? Because we bought 10 of those positions. You would make back 50% of your position. Plus, you would get to keep your shares. Does that make sense? I hope it does. You can @ me, leave a comment either below this video or whatever. But that's kind of the general consensus basis. That's how you run the wheel. That's the most straightforward and easy way. Of course, there's always risks that come up, but for the most part, it's really not. It's probably the most risk-free way of trading that you can do. Way less risky because you just own shares, right? You just own shares and you let them rock, or you don't own shares and you're waiting for it to come back down to your price. I mean, it's just super simple. Let's say like you are a big Tesla fan, right? You love Tesla. And you're thinking, okay, I want to own Tesla at 284, and I will not buy Tesla unless it is at or below 284. Okay. So that may be a little extreme for our example, but let's grab Robinhood. Let's go over to Tesla. And again, this doesn't have to be, you don't have to sell these every week. You can do these on a larger time frame. If you wanted to buy Tesla 45, again, you can do these for 45 days out. 45 days out, 284. We'll call it 285. 285. Now, they're not super expensive, but it's like if you thought Tesla was going to stay above 285 in the next 45 days, you could sell a cash secured put right now for $456. Now and that's for one. That is for one position. Now again, remember the risk is that you have to own 100 shares of Tesla at 284.70, right? So 284.70 times 100 shares, right? So $28,000 risk to own them here at 284. But if you think it stays above this, or if this was already your entry point, you're telling yourself, I don't even care because this is where I want to be into the stock at, then you could make $465 for free because that's where you already wanted to enter. So it is what it is. It's more of a long-term investing strategy. You can do it on shorter time frames, like weeklies, like on Webull, and I don't know. There's other fast-acting, cheaper stocks that you can do. TSLL is a really good one. Soxel, things like that. There's pretty good option chains for those on the weekly time frame. I like longer-dated puts. It just is what it is. A lot of these stocks I already own, so I'm just gonna, sell against them. But anyway, this video is already getting too long. We're at 25 minutes now. I want to keep everybody's attention as best I can. So if you do have any questions about running the wheel, let me know, and we'll kind of dive into it probably a little bit more deeply as the time comes. So anyway, have a good day, guys. Peace.